All right, everyone, we've got to talk about West Virginia again. The predictable AstroTurf, as predicted only days ago, is proceeding. Link in the description, archived, of course. You need no further evidence that I was completely correct about what was happening in West Virginia. This, of course, coming from the legacy media for a reason. Of course, what was happening before, Joe Manchin, because he voted for the infrastructure bill after months of telling his constituents, many of whom are Republicans, this is West Virginia, there's not enough Democrats to fill a goddamn swimming pool in the whole state. He pissed off his constituents by lying for months while secretly holding meetings with Biden. That was number one. And number two, flipping on gun control. Big mistake for Joe Manchin. He has been favored to lose re-election now for many moons, and his main opponent was Alex Mooney. He's a state representative, perfectly capable of knocking out Manchin, and he happens to be a Freedom Caucus Republican. He's a MAGA Republican. He's a Trump ally. What happened a week ago? Jim Justice, the former sitting governor in West Virginia, also a Republican. I think he had been a Democrat in the past, though, which is echoes of Joe Manchin. You know, be careful what you buy and pay for, West Virginians. The writing is on the wall about what's happening here. He got in, immediately gets endorsed by McConnell and Graham and the other slime bags, whereas Mooney had been endorsed by people like Rand Paul and, for what little, very little it's worth, Ted Cruz. And so you have this stark comparison. You have the Unipartyist, you know, sort of the half-assed, almost like, I'm surprised Ted Cruz doesn't flip and endorse Jim Justice. It's the same category of Republicans. People who pay a little bit of lip service to like populist and economically actually conservative causes, while being really falling into the Cornyn and Mitt Romney category more than anything else as far as the actual political pragmatism that they operate with. Now, Mooney probably would crush Manchin by 5 to 10 points. That would be probably an underestimation about Manchin's likely losing margin. So now that Jim Justice has gotten in and he's massively rich, he will be funded by the RNC. He will be astroturfed, like with this article. They badmouth Mooney here and say, well, if Mooney were in there, we didn't immediately talk about this race as though it were safe GOP. So basically assured that Manchin would lose because Mooney has been known to be an underperformer. Okay, whatever. It's again, you're going up against an incumbent. That's a headwind. But he's massively unpopular in the state's like 70% fucking Republicans. Any Republican with any principles whatsoever should be able to beat Joe Manchin at this point. Manchin is chronically under fundraising. For Q1, it was only a few 100,000 that he managed to grab, and this is a mainline, a high-level Senate seat. I'm surprised that the Democrats aren't trying to primary Joe Manchin out. I'm surprised that they're not trying to replace him before a general election even begins. By the way, Manchin hasn't even announced that he's running for re-election. You may have a non-incumbent Democrat running. The possibility is not off the table. So what does Mitch McConnell do? Much like with the last election, honk honk, which was also totally above board, with Cawthorn and Masters and Mehmet Oz and Herschel Walker and a bunch of other people, he and McCarthy and Ronna McDaniels and Lindsey Graham and all the other power players within the GOP have decided to try to prevent a MAGA candidate from winning a Senate seat by putting forth their own pawn, by astroturfing Jim Justice as the electable candidate. No, Mooney can't beat a dude with popularity in the low 30s. It's impossible. In a state that's 70% partisan Republicans, yes, he would have such a hard time. Dude, he could not fundraise at all. He could just put his name on the fucking ballot and not even campaign and probably come in close to winning against Manchin. The effort required is tiny. The fact is that Jim Justice is perceived as more electable only if you astroturf the concept. Justice also has severe problems with regards to some of his personal dealings. Of course, he's a coal baron. Oh, the people of West Virginia then can be assured he's not going to go after the coal miners. That's perfectly wonderful. Other than that, though, and the fact that he's unlikely to cuck on guns the same way that Manchin did, it's not really that big a change other than the letter after the person's name. And so I would encourage West Virginians in the GOP primary there to vote for Alex Mooney as your candidate. You will be told, however, for weeks or months to come, that he's less electable, that you have an easy pickup as long as you go with the one that was endorsed by Mitch McConnell. as long as you go with the one that was endorsed by the RNC. And I would point this out. If Mooney is the nominee, if Jim Justice is rejected by the people of West Virginia, you can be absolutely assured that Mitch McConnell and people like him will work with Joe Manchin to preserve his seat. Mitch would rather work with Mitch McConnell than with another Freedom Caucus member in the Senate, because Mitch McConnell and Joe Manchin are more likely to agree on issues than Mitch McConnell would with a MAGA Republican. So look forward to that, assuming that you do get the better candidate. I don't think Jim Justice is terrible. It's just, again, it's one of the useful, sometimes idiots in Congress that you'd be having there. If you do end up getting Mooney, look for Uniparty shenanigans. They'll try to limit fundraising. They'll try to say, well, he's got it in the bag anyway, so we're not going to fundraise for him. And then they'll blame MAGA for not fundraising more if he loses. And they will try to help Joe Manchin win if his opponent is MAGA. If you have a race in which you have two controlled opposition candidates, so a Manchin versus Justice, they're backed by Unipartyists, doesn't matter who wins. Yeah, basically it just becomes a horse race. It doesn't really matter who wins. You make money off of it. You can, slap your friends on the back because you just won the betting pool or something, but it's not really meaningful for the most part. If, though, it is not controlled opposition, so if it is Trump v. Biden, then the entire Uniparty, including the party that represents that non-Unipartyist, will congeal, mostly behind closed doors, partially in public, and attempt to stop them. Because that's the nature of corrupted globalism that unfortunately runs the U.S. federal system at the moment. It is corruption, it is deep state, it is globalism, it's tyranny, effectively. What the Republican Party's leadership wants is to put the MAGA cat back in the bag. They're having trouble, by the way, doing it. Why do you think there are a bunch of Trump indictments looming and shit like that? Why they are going to attempt to go after him legally because they're not confident they can stop him otherwise. They're not confident that Joe Manchin would actually be able to pull it off against this evil MAGA candidate. We already have to deal with him as a representative. Oh my God, imagine if he gets into the Senate. Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham clearly don't want to work with him. And so they went to Jim Justice and got him to run. But Manchin is likely to lose if he runs against a goddamn dog at this point. He has already permanently crippled himself, kneecapped his potential support because he flipped on multiple issues that West Virginians found important, and they applauded him. When he in public said, I'm not going to vote for Biden's bloated bill here because, the number of concessions required to cut it down to size even minutely is too much. I don't even want to negotiate, but he was behind closed doors. And at the end of the day, they parsed a couple of meaningful, frittering little details out of the bill, and then he came out on TV and said, oh, I'm glad to sign this. What a goddamn sellout he became. No, I wonder why his approval is so low. Again, Mooney wouldn't be the only one who could beat him either, or Jim Justice. You could have some also-ran magically get in there, some local steel magnate or some shit like that. Nobody even knows their name. They'd probably still win just by being on the fucking ballot as a Republican at this point. Nonetheless, look forward to them to simply proclaim Justice is the more electable one. Mooney is extreme. They'll drain funding from him. It won't be a fair fight. And if he does win, the McConnells of the Republican Party will attempt to stop him from beating Joe Manchin. I don't think they'll be successful. I think the gap is too wide, but they'll do everything that they can to try to make that happen. That's about all. Peace out.